Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Gabe.
It's Caleb.
And today you are watching another episode of the Positive Outlook Podcast. And Caleb, what are we talking about today?
Today we are talking about habits.
Habits, habits, habits. All right. First impression. Oh, you remember when we used to do a question of the day?
Question of the day.
Yeah,
I was wondering if that's what you were saying. Is
yeah,
let me hit with a question.
yeah.
Yeah,
Just to rip it off the bat. All right. Question of the day. I guess it's an easy intro. This is wheels are
hmm
spinning right now. I haven't even thought of anything prior to this. How important are habits to you?
Right now it is kind of quintessential. I'm kind of on a personal rebuild in certain aspects of my life, and so one thing I've had under a magnifying glass is habits. Um, it's huge, and I think a lot of people can relate to it right now because it's with the new year. I don't know if we know this about us, but I personally am not a big fan of New Year's resolutions.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you are. Are you? What's
I
your
don't
take on them?
I don't mind them. See, what I like to say is when it comes to change in your life, when it comes to anything that's big, you shouldn't have to wait for your circumstances to change, right? A lot of people rely on that. Like if you're going to do it January 1st, why not do it November 1st? You know what I mean?
hmm
But at the same time, I love the season. I love the inspiration of it, and I love anything that can get people moving and get them off their feet. If it takes January 1st, so be it. That's my opinion on it.
If it was a higher statistic of people sticking with the resolutions, I
Yeah.
might have a little more understanding of them. But I do agree with the November 1st versus January 1st mindset kind of thing. However, you can't knock an excuse to set goals. But
Mhm.
let's flip it back to you. How important are habits to you?
Man, so talking about the quote of the day, right? Show me your habits and I'll show you your future. I think I think that boils down how important habits are, right? Whatever you do each day, whatever you want to attract in life, who you want to be at the end of the day. Take if you want to be a very successful businessman, take Jeff Bezos for example. Well, what were Jeff Bezos's habits when he was going to that point? Well, obviously, all of his habits were business oriented. You know, he probably wasn't playing too many video games. He wasn't out drinking all the time. He wasn't doing all those things. He was focusing on what's going to get him to his end goal. And honestly, when you break it down simply, all of your goals are generated because of habits. So, simply taken, show me your habits, I'll show you your future, right? So,
100%.
now I liked what you said earlier about excuse me, about what you said with the statistics about showing people sticking to their goals when it comes to the new year. What do you think is the biggest problem there? Why don't people stick with their habits or their goals?
Well, personally, I think one of the biggest things, especially with New Year's, is it's an emotional thing. It's where you're using more emotion to generate these goals than per se more of the logical aspect because you're excited that it's a new year, it's a reset point. And so you set all these high expectations without actually creating any sort of action plan or focusing on the habits that will help you bring you to these resolutions and goals. And I love any reason to set new goals. And honestly, there is that refresh feeling of a new year. I personally am using 2025 as a rebuild year
Mhm.
in order to set up my 2026. And on a minuscule scale, before New Year's, like right before, I've actually kind of adopted this day to day mindset of what can I do today to make tomorrow easier for myself?
Yeah.
And it's like a super minuscule way to help slowly build the habits to start setting up for goals and kind of goes along with your quote of the day where show me your habits, I'll show you the future because you're working on that the day before, you're setting up for the very next day. So it's a more immediate version
Yeah.
of the same exact thing.
Yeah. No, I love it. I love it very much. So now when it comes to habits, right? You have to have the end point in goal to even know what your habit should be, right? So a lot of people like to look at the entire wall and say, right, you take a step back, you say, I just want to become a healthier person. Okay, so let's make it simple. I want to drink more water. I'm going to start working out. I'm going to go for walks, right? Very easy, very simple. The problem is that truly what you want, right? Do you want to go for walks? Do you want to work out? Do you want to drink water? Obviously, you want to be healthier, but do you want to do those three things? So that's I if I'm understanding properly, when you go back up, when you said that it's about the emotion tied to it, and
hmm
so yeah, I think it's really important for people to kind of take that step back and say, okay, well, what aligns with my values? What aligns with who I am? And how can I create habits that will make me a better person for me, right?
Yes, absolutely. And then another thing I'd like to kind of focus on real quick is we're talking about specifically positive habits right now, but it's also analyzing your negative habits,
Mhm.
which is a huge part because we all know our bad habits, right?
Right.
We don't necessarily admit to them or whatever, or we're not always open about what our bad habits are. But every single human being on the planet develops bad habits.
Right.
And so, in order to help construct towards your goals and enforce more positive habits, you have to sit down with yourself and almost have sort of a self conference on what your bad habits are and create an action plan for helping eliminate those while you're also creating those good habits.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we dive into bad habits a little bit, right? So bad
Hmm.
habits, let's just say junk food, picking I guess like going out picking up fast food because it's convenient, it's easy, smoking, drinking soda with your meals, stuff like that. So I
Sleep
was
schedule is a big one.
Yeah, yeah, sleep schedule for sure. So I was listening to a TED talk that was it was a guy who helps individuals. He works at a clinic. He helps them overcome addictions. And so
Hmm.
they did a study, they did something new where people came in and instead of teaching people how to defend and like tense up and kind of play defense against their urges, he told them just let it be there, right? Don't think about it too much. Don't freak out. Okay, so um I'm gonna either make dinner here at home tonight, and I could make ground beef and rice, or I've got potato chips and mac and cheese in the cabinet. Which one sounds better? Or like a box of cookies, right? Which one sounds better? Well, obviously you want the sugar, you want the dopamine, all that stuff. But when you're sitting there and you're fighting that urge, right? All you do is you think about it more and you think about it more and you think about it more. It's just eating you away. So what if you just say like, all right, I'll let the monster be. I'll let the monster be one with me. I'll let it grow. And I'm not gonna freak out. I'm not gonna let it get to me. And maybe by doing this, you'll grab a cookie here and there, right? Because you're okay with it. You're accepting and you're understanding that it's okay to have that urge there. However, you'll realize long term that when you're not fighting it and you don't see it as this necessary evil in your life, it eventually just becomes part of you. And you slowly just stop having that bodily reaction and that mental shift, I guess. Whereas it's okay and it's just part of you. You're not fighting it anymore and you're slowly just starting to make the better decisions because it's what you want.
100%. And it's kind of mirrors what we were discussing with how your habits will determine your end goal in a positive light. This is the same exact thing in the reverse order, where you need to have that end goal in sight. But if you just focus on the day-to-day trends, if you
Yeah.
can push off, because I've had plenty of things, whether it's a bad study schedule where I've pushed off, I in my mind I'd make it this massive thing where it's like I have to be doing this.
Yeah.
I get all anxious or freak out about it. Whereas if I'm just like, okay, well, let's just do a little bit. Let's just do a
Right.
little bit of
Yeah.
homework. Let's maybe game a little less today or whatever it is that's I'm really freaking out about. If I just
Mhm.
kind of take it one little chip at a time and do it more in moderation than try and go to a full extreme,
Yeah.
it's almost always more successful.
Yeah. And eventually you're going to realize that you're enjoying that more. You're enjoying
Hmm.
you're enjoying choosing the better of the two because it's making you not only feel better, but mentally you're understanding that you're using your discipline muscle and you're slowly becoming who you want to be through your habits. Have you
100%.
have you heard how you do one thing is how you do everything?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, excuse me. I think that's really important to understand. If we take the next step and we look into how our habits are being built, now, eventually, you are going to have to focus. You are going to have to be 100% in what you want if you want to achieve the things that you're set out to achieve, right? Eventually, you're going to have to
Hmm.
cut out all the bad. You're going to have to focus on you. So, it's really important. I know we did an episode on tenacity. It's really important to understand that how you do one thing is how you're going to do everything. So, if you cut corners, if you slack, if you do anything like that, and if it's with something mediocre, right? Like, um, I guess, for example, if you're at work and you're like, well, I know this is how boss wants me to do it, but I'm just going to do it this way because it's a little bit easier, it's a little bit quicker, but the result will be the same, you know? Now that's going to translate to the gym, right? I'm still at the gym. I'm still working out. The result's going to be the same. It translates to your relationship. It translates to family. It does everything like that. So you got to nip it in the butt. You really just how you do one thing is how you do everything.
And once you develop habits, they're really hard to kick. And that works in the positive light where you develop that good sleep schedule. I've had sleep schedules where I tried to stay up later than I like to
Yeah.
or than I usually go to bed,
Hmm.
and I'm passing out and then I'm waking up at
Yeah.
the on my days off at 6 a.m. because my
Yeah.
habits are built like that. But it happens in the reverse way. If you continue to cut corners, it gets really hard to push yourself to simply not cut corners. We're not saying like, you go from focusing on overachieving to focusing on not cutting corners, it becomes far more difficult.
Yeah.
They're really, really hard to develop sometimes, but they're even harder to kick when they're bad habits, and if you don't kick them, they will kick you.
Absolutely. Um, a great anecdote that just popped into my head. So when I was flipping that property 2 years ago in 2023, um, I remember I had someone that was Riley's dad who was helping me get everything set up for the property. And he was helping me with some of the projects. And I remember before we even started on the house, he helped me build some sawhorses. And I remember he was so anal about everything when it came to it. So he brought a bunch of 2x4s and he's like looking down them, little curve, set it aside. Look at another one, little curve, set it aside. In my head, I'm thinking, dude, we can use any of these 2x4s. It'd be fine. Like, it doesn't matter. They're just sawhorses. But no, he found the perfect sawhorses, right? Measured twice, cut once, kept doing it. We built the perfect sawhorses. And then we go inside and I start to work on excuse me, I start to work on some of the trim work. And I'm doing some of the trim work and it's a little short, whatever. I'll fill in the rest with caulk. He comes up, he's like, dude, that's short. Like you're gonna have to fill that in, whatever. But I noticed with everything that he was doing, he was so anal and so particular on it just being perfect that it just made sense because then we look at other projects in the house, right? When we took over the house, there were so many things that were done poorly that we had to redo the entire project just because they didn't take the time the first time. So we went through that whole house and made everything perfect that eventually the entire house was perfect. And
Mhm.
that's kind of what we're getting at here is in your life, going to the gym is doing the trim work, focusing on your diet is building those sawhorses. Everything you're doing you want to do to a T so that you don't have to go back and do double the work to correct it.
And I think I've actually specifically said this quote on the podcast before, but when you do one lazy rep, realistically, is it going to hurt anything? No. But you know what it is going to do? Make the next lazy rep a lot easier. And it
Exactly.
just continues. It's a domino effect and it's exponential. And you'll be shocked at how quickly one lazy rep turns into one lazy workout, turns into one lazy day, turns into one lazy week. Next thing you know, you're millions of miles from your goals because you decided to have one lazy rep.
Yeah. Yeah, what's The Atomic Habits? Have you ever read that book or are you familiar with it?
I'm familiar with it. I have never
Yeah.
read the book.
So there's that there's that statistic in there. It's like if you took off in a plane from it was like LA to Florida or something like that, like Fort Lauderdale, and you turn the plane 3 inches in the air from takeoff to where you land, you'd be like 1,500 miles away from where your target destination is.
As a pilot, I can confirm.
Yeah, right. So it's basically like that. And obviously your life isn't like flying like a plane, but that anecdote works perfectly. You understand that you just have to aim at your target, you have to stay on track, or else eventually you're gonna do all this work, get to the destination, you're gonna be like, where the hell am I? This isn't where I wanted to go. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely, 100%. And that's really the main focus is a big piece of habits is awareness of your habits. When you can kind of keep track of your habits, you
Hmm.
can it's a lot easier to correct bad habits, but also make sure you're rewarding yourself for the good habits. It
Yeah.
can be difficult to develop good habits or to kick bad habits. And I think I don't do this enough personally where I'm hyper focused on the fact that I have a bad habit, that once I finally overcome the bad habit, I'm just moving on to the next thing, moving on to the next thing, and
Yeah.
there's no reward for it. And I'm not saying you have to, celebrate every time you kick a bad habit, but make sure you acknowledge it.
Yeah.
And it's not something that everybody can do.
Yeah, 100%, man. That's something I've been realizing a ton in my life lately is I've been looking back at my life. Things I used to dream of are coming to fruition for me. And all I can think about is how I'm not there yet. How I haven't done A, how I haven't done B, how I haven't done C. And I can pause and I can take a step back and I say, dude, look at all of the hard work you've done. Look at how far you've come. Look at what you've accomplished. If 5 years ago you set down a to do list in front of you and you had all of those boxes checked off, man, you'd be giddy. You'd be running around the room like, "We did it. We did it." You know what I mean? But now
Hmm.
you have to pause and you have to understand it. You have to be grateful and you have to recognize what you have accomplished. Because if you don't, you're going to get lost in what else is next? What else can I do? Instead of giving yourself that pat on the back, giving yourself the positive reinforcement, saying, "I did it, let's do it again."
1,000%. One of the most important things in the world because on top of that, it's just a compound effect. Once you've rewarded yourself, that feels good, and now your brain knows the next big accomplishment you have, there's a reward sitting there and waiting.
Mhm.
It's pretty crazy the psychological effect that simply rewarding yourself for these tasks that can have on you.
Yeah, and they definitely help you stay disciplined. When you know that you're going to get that reward at the end of it, I guess whatever your reward may be in the situation, whether it's just you're telling yourself I did it, or if you actually like when every time I used to close a real estate deal, I would go out to we have a tavern, Mary's Tavern. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but every time every time that we closed a real estate deal, I was like, let's go out to dinner. That's what we would do every
Mhm,
time. And so that place, we wouldn't ever go there unless we closed a real estate deal. So it was like extra fun, extra special. So it was those things. So when I was there, I was like, yeah, we did it. This is awesome. I can reward myself here. So being able to reinforce that discipline is so important because when it comes to making habits, moving into the next phase of it, when it comes to making habits, the most oftentimes someone will quit is when they run into their first failure, right?
mhm,
So if
yep,
we take a look at discipline, well, I guess we'll back up a little bit. So when you look at failure, when you fail, it's discipline that helps you get back up. Discipline helps you stand up and say, I have to keep going, but it's consistency and persistence that let you take the next step. So having discipline is beautiful and it's great for getting yourself back on your feet, but once you're back on your feet, you have to start taking steps again, right?
yep. Absolutely. And I think another big piece that you could tie in with it is, and this is a big one personally, is patience. Patience, patience, patience. Whether you're giving up a habit or you're gaining a good habit, it takes a lot of patience. It's understanding, and we kind of talked about this with the addiction thing, but it's kind of reinforcing, but it's also emphasizing the actual aspect of the patience, where it's like, hey, I'm sitting here, I'm trying to build this entire wall. I have to understand, as Gabe loves to say, brick by brick. I have
Mhm.
to focus on it brick by brick. And so to build a whole wall, it's going to take me a lot longer by doing it brick by brick, but it's knowing that you're doing it the right way.
Mhm.
It's knowing that, hey, tomorrow we're not even going to have half of a wall still, but we're still going to be focusing on
Right.
that brick by brick.
Yeah. And if your goals truly align with who you are as a person and that end goal is exactly who you want to be, taking the time to build those bricks will not matter to you because by the time you build that whole wall, you're who you need to be. That was your goal. You've accomplished it. And
Hmm.
now what? Are you going to create another goal? Or are you content with what you have? Now you have to reassess everything, which is fine. But right now, focus on your goal. The time will pass anyway, so you might as well be working towards pushing yourself and becoming that person.
And the reason I like to emphasize on patience when it comes to habits, goals, everything is because I'm the type of person that sometimes reactionarily I get overwhelmed by things because I zoom out and I'm focused on all the things I'm doing
Yep.
wrong and all the things I'm not doing right.
Yep.
And if you just take a breather and realize you're going to have to just focus on it little by little, it's going to take time. I mean,
Hmm.
there's certain habits that I've developed that I was ashamed that I've developed, but realistically, they weren't that hard to kick as long as I was focused on the patience aspect. It's going to get easier
Yeah.
every day. Every day, it's going to get a little easier. It's actually not going to change that much, but you're going to get better at it.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. There's only three different outcomes that can come with you facing a challenge, right? You can either face the challenge, decide it's too difficult for you, and walk away. That's one option. You give up, you quit. The second option is whatever you are doing just gets easier, right? It can slowly get easier. You got through the hard part and now it's smooth sailing. The third option that could happen is you get stronger. And by becoming stronger, the task eventually just gets easier, right? Those are the three options that can happen in a challenge. There's nothing else that can happen. So, ultimately when you're facing the challenge, right? I like to say you can't oh no, let me back up here. I had it. I had it for a second there in my head. Oh, yes. Okay, you can't pray for growth and get upset at the obstacles thrown your way because those obstacles that are in your path are meant for you to overcome because you need to face challenges and you need to face adversity to grow. There is no other way to grow in your life. You cannot sit stagnant and expect yourself to grow. You need to face these challenges, you need to face adversities, and by overcoming them is how you grow.
Absolutely, and that's kind of one of those things where, pray for a certain outcome and then get the obstacles. It's kind of like the way you do one thing, the way you do all things
Yeah.
is a lot of the problems that I have are constantly obstacles that come in the same form with different things. Whether it's a disciplinary action of making sure I'm brushing my teeth and flossing my teeth every single day, every single time, like twice a day, brushing my teeth, flossing at least once. Like it I constantly run into the same things over and over again where it's the same gap. It's the same gap in different forms. And so when you can kind of push through that, it starts working in all other aspects
Yeah.
because the way you do one thing, the way you do all things.
Yep.
And it just takes time, seriously.
Yeah.
But those obstacles, you have to be ready. What is life trying to teach you right now? What is it trying to teach you?
Yeah.
Because it will be repeated over and over and over.
Yeah. I think I think if we had a massive mindset shift or change, that whenever an obstacle is thrown your way, instead of wondering why this is happening to you, instead of wondering how you can, what's the least I can do to get by, ask yourself, is this going to be an opportunity for me to prove to myself that I have shown growth? What is the most I can bear to become great? What can this obstacle add to my life? What value can I find from this? Excuse me. And you just take it from there. Have that shift. Instead of seeing
And
obstacles as being such a negative thing, learn from them and grow from them.
absolutely, that's one of the quotes I was actually going to mention here is instead of why me, ask what is this trying to teach me.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's beautiful, man. It's I don't know. I like to say, I've been saying it for a while, is people who are given obstacles, people who are born with adversity, people who have the bad hand that they were dealt, they all have superpowers because people who have never had to deal with that before will not know what to do when it's presented to them. However, you who have dealt with it before now have the upper hand. You have the tools you need to climb over that wall, to jump that hurdle. You have everything you need. So let's do it. And now they just keep coming, right? And you just keep getting faster and stronger and faster and stronger. You can handle anything at that point.
And one thing I'd really like to say to kind of slowly circle back to habits is when everything in your life crumbles, all that you have left is your habits. That is why it is so important to create good habits. I know this from personal experience. When you're completely drained, when you have nothing left in the tank, and it's time to fall back on the fundamentals, when it's time to go through the motions to get you through, that's when you're really going to want those good habits to help push you through those types of situations
Yeah.
because it's not easy. I mean, sometimes you can doubt everything, everything falls apart, everything's caving in, and all you have left to fall back on are your habits.
Yeah. And I it's such a niche quote. Man, I've heard it so many times in my life, but I think really the gist of that was remember why you started, right? Remember who you are, what your virtues are, what your fundamentals are, who you want to become, right? Because obviously, I mean, if you're already where you're at, where you want to be in life, if you're the person who that you're happy with moving forward, awesome. I'm so happy for you. However, if you're not, this is where it comes into play. Remember why you started. You need to understand who you are, who you want to become. When challenges are thrown your way, think what would the person at the end of the road do here? Are they going to throw in the towel and give up? no, that's not the kind of person I want to be. That's not who the kind of person at the end of the road is. I want to become that person, so I'm not going to give up. I'm going to keep going.
And I love looking forward and backwards because you don't wanna let the guy at the end of the road down, but you don't wanna let that kid that started down either.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. You want, like I said earlier, if you had that to-do list in front of yourself 5 years ago, and 5 years from now, like today, if you just write down, this is what I want to accomplish in 5 years, and slowly they just started, like the pen picks up itself and it's checking itself off, right? Because future you just is there with you, just checking off the boxes, like we did it, man. That's so empowering, and you can say, first of all, the guy at the end of the road is always going to look back and say, "Good job, kid. You did it. You took the first step. You took the initiative." As a team, right? Us two, we've completed this together. And you at the beginning will just say at the end, "I'm proud of you for sticking through it." And that's what's important.
Absolutely, and it's truly amazing. I know I dogged on New Year's resolutions, but it really is amazing what you could develop and what you could do in a singular year. So if you're a little late to the party, if you don't have anything mapped out yet for 2025, get thinking, get cooking,
Yeah.
start putting up some goals, start thinking about who do you want to be at the end of this year. You might be completely shocked at what you can accomplish in a singular year, or maybe it's a little underwhelming, but either way, you're moving forward from where you're at.
Yeah.
And I promise you, more times than not, you'll be surprised how much progress you can make in that amount of time.
Brick by brick, right? So, yeah,
Hmm.
anybody who's watching, if you've made it this far, make sure to like, subscribe, drop in the comments below what your resolutions are for this year. Dude, I feel like we absolutely crushed this episode. There's so much energy. This feels good. Do you have anything else you
It's
want
been a
to add?
while.
Yeah, it has been a while,
I
but
honestly, it's just great being back. Guys, remember, habits take time. They take time to kick, they take time to grow. It's all about taking the time to work on those habits. As we've said a million times this episode, habits can build everything. So just focus on the habits, get those goals set. It's been great being back. I'm excited for what we have planned ahead.
amen. Yes. Um, Other than that, I mean, guys, just give yourself some compassion along the way. It's your first time here on Earth too, right? So we're all doing this together. But ultimately, remember who you want to be at the end of the path and go kick some ass. Let's do it. Happy New Year.
And happy Monday.
Peace.